Hello everyone, this is my introductory video for Neverwinter Foundry. Any of you wondering what this little button does on your character select screen, this is how you go into the editor to make your own quests and campaigns. Now you have 10 slots for quests, 10 slots for campaign. A quest is a one-off adventure, no overarching story to it, as opposed to a campaign, which is a series of quests, as the toolbar says right there. Now anything that you've either published or you're currently working on can be found from this menu. This top one here, it says right there, not published, as opposed to this one, which has 4 stars. Thanks for those of you who rated it. And anybody who's left a detailed review, you can find it by clicking on that tab right there. Now it doesn't tell you who left what for stars, and if they didn't leave a detailed review, you won't even know who played it. So those of you who did play it and like it, please leave a detailed review. And one of the first things we're going to be looking at once we get into the editor itself is the description. Anybody can see this, that's why it says private notes down there. You want to leave anything for yourself, things that you want to come back and edit at a later date. This one, for example, needs to be longer. I could leave it in private notes right there. So in order to start digging into this, let's start by clicking on New Quest. The Foundry will take a while to set up. Take this time to plug my guild, East Coast Trauma. I've made this video based on the request of a couple of members on there. We've got our own TeamSpeak channel and our own web forums at ectrauma.com. They're always looking for more mature and social players who are willing to help out and be active on the forums and TeamSpeak. Sounds interesting? Go ahead and check them out. So, when the Foundry editor starts, it will put us on the Quest tab. You see you have 6 tabs up here. We'll get to them as we go through building this quest. For now, this is where we can enter the name of the quest, the public description, and the private notes. As you can see, there are yellow triangles here with exclamation points that tell us these are required tasks. And the number of required tasks can be found up here, next to the Publish button and the Save button. The details of those tasks can also be found here under the pre-published task list. Now, personally, I don't like to fill in this description until I am ready to publish. The reason is the Save button is right next to the Publish button. And if it's late and I'm tired and I'm trying to save and I accidentally click Publish, then I'm going to publish something that's incomplete. So by leaving this blank, I make sure that I don't do that. I will go ahead and enter the name here. We're going to call it Traumatized since we're doing it for East Coast Trauma. Our number gets reduced to 2. And since we got a triangle here, the Story tab tells us you've got to add a map. No problem. You have 2 options here. The custom map, which we'll get to later, and entering a Neverwinter Adventure Zone map. We're going to see what this is. In order to actually select the map, we have to select an objective. Our objectives are over here: interact with object, kill enemies, dialogue, inspect object, unlock door, or reach point. We're going to go with dialogue. And we're going to go ahead and click on this. And still thinking, how exactly do we select the map we want? Well, we're going to click the NPC button. And that brings us up our list of maps. By default, we're on Protector's Enclave, but you also have the Moonstone Mask, Velosk, Tower District, a bunch of them. Black Lake is another one. Here's something to consider though. A lot of these that are on my list here are leveled maps, like Ice Spire Peak I just got when I hit level 42. So you might want to consider, if you want to have as many people look at your quest as possible, you probably don't want to have somebody who's level 15 trying to navigate a map that's going to have creatures leveled up at 40. So in order to make things easier for everyone, I'm going to select Protector's Enclave. So every little red square here is an NPC that they can get a quest from. If we zoom in, we'll see this is the Hall of Justice. This is where you find Sergeant Knox, but he can't be one of those NPCs we can select. There is, however, a Merchant Guild and a Cleric representative. So we go down here, we see there's a guard, there's a street urchin down there, and here is a merchant if you want to have them just get their quest in the market along with all of their gear. Now in the upper right here, you'll see that there is a serving girl for the Driftwood Tavern. So all of these little structures up here are probably other structures that are internal maps in Neverwinter. Unfortunately, the Driftwood Tavern is the only one that they have a NPC for. So, time to select an NPC. The name of our quest is Traumatized, so maybe it's one of these urchins who's been traumatized. Now, if you don't know what these NPCs look like, you click on them and you get a brief description. This one is near the marketplace and has a nasty cough. This one is on a side street and is not coughing. Well, we like him better. He's not contagious. So, a new required field that pops up here, you have to have the quest text. This is what's going to pop up in the drop-down menu near their mini-map on the right-hand side. So, no need to have anything long there. Then the next box is the actual dialogue. So, all we have is the one text box there. But we can go into the advanced dialogue editor, which is in fact the same thing as the dialogue tree. Now we have the ability to add multiple responses and create a true dialogue tree. As you can see, once you create that response, the dialogue tree gets wider. This can get very big if you're not careful, and you can always just explore it by scrolling left and right. And luckily copy paste here works, so if you do wind up with a huge dialogue tree, use that Control-C, Control-V. It'll save yourself a lot of time. So, through the magic of editing, we now have dialogue for this character. And what you can do is click on the mission info or the out of character buttons here. If you want to say this is mission info, and this will appear in orange text, and this tells the player the character is not actually saying that. This is just something for you to know. And then you also have the out of character button is there as well, which is text that appears in yellow. But this is all just going to appear in white. The other thing you can select here is an animation that will play when the character gives their line of dialogue. So this would be a one-time emote where they make an admiring gesture and then stop and stare awkwardly at you. Then you have the looping animations, in this case cheering and waving. And they will continue to do this until you progress to the next line of dialogue. These are purely optional, and there's no way of telling for sure what they look like until you preview the dialogue. You can do this by this button right here. It'll take you inside of Tavern, the NPC will be there, and you can actually see the animations as they deliver that dialogue. Now you can also give your responses here. What I usually do is I give the player the ability to say no to the quest right here. And you can also select the quest choice, quest info, or white for normal responses here. And what we can get to later is, if they can only unlock this line of dialogue, as it says here, if they have an item or if they have a particular skill. So Arcana, Dungeoneering, Nature, Not Religion, Thievery. The items list is blank because we haven't created any custom items for this quest yet. And also you can have it be a timed unlock. So if this was an objective that happens later in your quest and you don't actually want them to be able to skip forward and talk to this NPC until they've done something else in your quest line, you can prevent them from doing that using those options. Now in this case we've given them the goodbye option, which does not advance the storyline, so that's what this button for right here. Fail story objective does not mean they have to start the entire quest over, it just means they have to start the dialogue over. And that gives them the ability to get out of the quest in favor of a PvE raid or something like that. So, now you ask yourself, what do they do now that they've talked to this urchin? Well, usually this is where I'm putting in my second map. We're going to do this by clicking on the plus map button, and this time we're going to select add a new custom map. So we have two options here, indoor and outdoor. Now the outdoor maps, as you'll see here, you have a bunch of them that are actually maps that are used in the story quests. This is the Black Lake District. Further down you'll have the Clock Tower, Helm's Hold, which is fine if you don't want to do a lot of work for yourself and designing your own objects and creating your own area. But if you do want to select something that the player hasn't seen before, you have plenty of blank maps. That's a fork in the path, winding path, along with just some blank plains, that sort of thing. Now, as you can see, this tells you it's 1025 by 1024, which doesn't exactly mean a lot unless you go into it and actually see the map itself. You can also look at this and see, well, I think there are some hills here, and this looks mostly flat, but you're going to want to go into this and you're actually going to want to look at it, which we'll do a little bit later. So for now, we're going to select something small. We don't want to have something completely undetailed, so let's say it's a winding path, small map. We can't even create it until we give it a name. So it's a place, right? Place. Version is an optional field. You don't have to enter anything there, so we won't. And the next thing you're going to have to select is the map transition. How do they get from Protector's Enclave to this new map we created? Well, they either will or will not use the overworld map. Now, if they are not using it, then that means they're leaving from somewhere else in Protector's Enclave in this case, though there are plenty of options to choose from depending on which map you've chosen. So there are all sorts of things to choose from here in Protector's Enclave, including barrels. Have them hop into a barrel and start the quest. Why not? But we're going to say let's use the overworld map instead. So that option disappears. And instead we get the overworld map. You're going to have to start by choosing the map marker. If you know that it's a hilly location, you can do that. If you're indecisive, you can just say X marks the spot. Now the only issue you're going to run into here is all throughout this area there are a bunch of areas that already exist, like Helm's Hold is in through here somewhere, along with the Never Death Graveyard, and you don't actually know whether or not you're putting your marker on top of somebody else's until you actually go in and play the thing. So it's one of those things you want to keep in mind. Always preview and make sure that your marker is not sitting on top of a major location in game. We'll put it there for now and hope that it's not in the way. Another thing I want to go back to here under the map transition is the quest text and the interact text. Instead of just saying go to the next map or do anything like that, you can enter a custom text field that tells them exactly what they're doing. Like, why are they hopping into this barrel? Well, you could explain it in there if you wanted to. But for now, we're going to go to the Maps tab, which now has something in it. This is the Winding Path map that we just selected. There's going to be two things on it by default. There's going to be a respawn point and a treasure chest. In this case, they're right on top of each other. Remove the respawn point. Now, the treasure chest is not something you can get rid of. This is here because every Foundry quest has to have a reward chest at the end. And since this is currently the end of the quest we're working on, that treasure chest is going to stay there until we make a new end for this quest. So for now, let's assume that's the end point. We'll move the spawn point over here. And these arrows over here are so you can rotate it. So your player is actually facing down the path. Now over here, Asset Library. This is where you add everything to this map, including another respawn point, if that's what you want to do. Now the nodes such as Ambush, Guardian, those are for AI. Once you get into your encounters, those will become important. We'll just look at the encounters briefly here, because when you're putting monsters on your map, this is where you will do it from. I'm on the Critter Group menu right now, so if you know it's going to be kobolds, you know that it's going to be orcs, you can sort specifically by those creature groups, along with by difficulty. If you want to have a bunch of easy monsters in this map because they're just trying to get from this map to another map, that's fine. If you want to have nothing but melee or nothing but ranged, you can do that as well. Now you can also create custom NPCs here. You'll have a bunch to choose from, and you can customize these later. That is what your costumes tab is for. Now probably the one you'll be using the most is the details tab. Again, there are filters here. If you know that it's going to be, an outdoor setting like a village, or an underground setting, or a natural setting, whatever you're looking for, you can filter it by those results. You can also say, well, I'm only interested in trees because I'm in a forest and I need more trees. Okay, forest, trees, and you only have 6 trees to choose from for a forest. Well, that's weird, because apparently there are no stumps in the forest. You're going to want to play around with these. You're always going to want to look out and say, well, this isn't what I'm looking for. Why isn't this here? Well, sometimes the filters are kind of counterintuitive. You can also search by text group, but that's not always going to be intuitive either. You're just going to have to play around with it and really look and explore to see whether or not what you're looking for is actually there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop a few random pieces into this map. The debris field is good for that. Maybe we're going to have a bunch of bones here. Have them strewn in random locations. Put one up here on the hillside. Put one maybe around here. I'm not quite sure if that's a flat area or not. What we're going to do with this is we're going to click on Play Map. This will actually give you the opportunity to see what this map looks like in-game. And as you can probably guess, it will take a while to load. The load time will vary depending on how much stuff you've added to your map, when was the last time you loaded it, that sort of thing. First time you try and load a new map that you put a bunch of assets on, it's going to be a long time loading. So get comfortable, have a sandwich, maybe a drink, whatever floats your boat. Now since this is the in-game engine and in-game assets, you're going to get in-game spam. Here's your Welcome to Neverwinter menu. Hey, do you want to join the skirmish for Black Lake? No, I'm in the Foundry Editor. Go away. Hey, do you want my mail? Have you gotten any mail here? No, I haven't. I'm in the Foundry Editor. Just ignore it. So we do have a new box over here. This says Enable 3D Editing. This is going to become your friend as soon as you start placing assets. Now if you actually have enemies here, you can go to Normal Combat Mode, Untargetable Mode, or God Mode. You can also kill targets with a quick Control Space. And of course, if you've accidentally put your spawn point outside of the boundaries of the map, and you've created a huge error for yourself, you can just click Reset Map and put your character somewhere where they're not floating in space. And of course, you can click to Return to Foundry to get out of here and back to editing. So, the character I've got here is a level 10 devoted cleric. You can adjust that later. As we can see, the bone debris that we've put on the map is right here. We also put one up on a hill. Now for the most part, it's okay about, not putting it in an area where it looks like defying gravity. But as you can see, this is a bunch of bones that's jutting out of a hillside. So this tells us, well, we need to do some 3D editing. Now, translate and rotate are the two tools we're going to be using here. And you get this little white wireframe box, and we've targeted it correctly. It turns blue. I'm going to click on that, and then the arrows light up depending on what kind of movement you're doing. Like, okay, we want these bones to be on top of the hill. Okay, it's still not looking right. Let's rotate them. You can do this quickly by hitting E, and now we've got a sphere. Okay, they're going to be on the hillside, and they're going to be kind of at that angle. Maybe slightly that way. You can kind of look around on them, you can kind of see that. I'm going to translate again. Hit Q is the shortcut key for translate, and we're going to bring them down. And it's kind of a big field of bones, so it still doesn't quite look right, but it looks a little bit better than it did before. Probably the best thing to do there would be just get rid of those bones. They look silly on that hill. And the last group of debris we placed over here. It's on the ground, doesn't look like it's defying gravity, looks fine. You also get a good sense of how big your map really is when you're in this part of the Foundry. As you can see, that is where your treasure chest is. It's always helpful because you'll have the little glowing path here that'll tell you exactly how to get there if you're curious. But for now, we're pretty much done exploring this map, so we can click Return to Foundry. Click OK here. And since the Foundry is already loaded and running in the background, we've got no load time to worry about here. Now we still have a couple of tabs that we haven't explored here, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. We'll probably save some of the more supplemental details for another video. But what we're going to do now is add an NPC to our map. And go up to the NPC part of the asset library. And there are filters here that are much more useful than they are for the details section. If you actually click on mails, it'll show you all the mails. You don't have to worry about missing any. And I can select multiple species here. There are the elves and there are the half-elves. And what you're going to find is you're going to have access to elves that are part of the normal story campaign. This guy appears in the Rothe Valley, has a name and everything. So you may not want to select him if you want a unique NPC that your players have never seen before. We're going to go ahead and look at some of these half-elves. Some of them have tattoos. Let's go ahead and select this guy who's got nothing going on here. Drag and drop him into the map right next to our spawn point, so he'll be ready to talk to our player when he comes into this map. We click on this, and this is how we can give him the name. Why not Bucky, the half-elf? There are not enough elves or half-elves named Bucky. That's just my personal opinion. Now down here you can adjust his visibility. Maybe you don't want Bucky to show up immediately. Maybe you have to accomplish something first before you get honored with Bucky's presence. Behavior, if you want him to be Bucky the dead half-elf, you can select dead body here. We're not going to bother with this right now. What we're going to look at instead is the customize button. And this takes us to the costumes tab. Now here we can zoom in, look at the details here. Looks like Bucky the half-elf has a scar over his eye. You can select the stance here if you want him to be average or a more heroic stance. If he's a guard or a fighter type, that'd be more appropriate. You can go completely nuts on here if you want to. Have him floating. Oh, he's a half-elf who's floating and he's a devil imp half-elf. Look at that. But we're going to stick with something basic here. And you have the costume pieces to choose from here. What you're going to find is that this utility is kind of limited. You have the armors available to choose from: control wizards, devoted clerics, great weapon fighters, guardian fighters, your trickster rogues. All that's available, including some NPC armors, including some armor of Lolth. Strange thing here is you can pick the armor for a fighter, but you can't actually pick a chain shirt. You've got all of the basic shirts to choose from here. So you're going to have to be flexible in terms of what you want your NPC to look like, because not all of the options that you think might be available are actually going to be available. But you can create a custom costume here. So with a little bit of editing magic, we've gone ahead and given our half-elf a referee uniform, because why not? Now you're going to have other options to choose from here once you select an actual costume piece. As you can see, shirts, pants, everything from the waist to the neck, helmets if that's applicable. And once you select a costume piece, that's how you unlock the colors. So his shirt here, if we don't want that white on there, maybe he's a bumblebee instead. Give him a little bit of a yellow kind of coloration there. I'm going to stick with that for now. And of course, if you want to say that this is specifically Bucky's costume, you can edit the name here. Now the good thing about this is this will actually be available as a costume template for any other NPC you design. So if you've come up with a specific costume design for a group of enemies that you want to use throughout your adventure, you can just refer to the same template every time and you keep going to this. Now let's say that Bucky's an NPC that we talk to and he's going to give you a key or something like that. Items tab is where you go to. You can create an item, name it. Let's say Bucky's key. Click the create button. And now we have another required field here. You have to give it some kind of description. A key. And then we give it an image. Now here, we're probably going to go to the miscellaneous tab, seeing as how this is something that's not gear, it's not a consumable, so obviously it's going to be here. Go down to maybe K for keys. This is another area where it's under M for miscellaneous, so what you think might be the appropriate alphabet order for that item is not actually what you think it is. Got a few different keys to choose from. Skull keys, always a popular choice. but it's an elf key. We'll go with something fancier. Yeah, it's a golden key with a blue ribbon. So from here, if we want to go to a dialogue tree, or maybe the story tab where one of our objectives is we have to talk to Bucky when we go to this map, you can click on the NPC, and Bucky will be placed here, right there. So now we have the ability to edit the dialogue for Bucky that's quest specific and say he's going to drop an item. He's going to give us this key. So that's basically the 6 tabs. As you can see, we now have something under the dialogue tree here where we have to edit Bucky's dialogue. The utility is pretty good for telling you what absolutely needs to be done. The one thing you're going to have to look out for is the fact you're going to run into error messages quite a bit. When this happens, it may or may not be straightforward about what you have to do to actually make your quest work. I ran into something in the story last time I was working on a quest where I had an NPC, somebody like Bucky. I said, okay, well, we're going to have Bucky here, and he's going to ask for 3 different items. We're going to bring him back to Bucky every single time. At that point, the game gave me an error saying, well, you can only use the same NPC once per objective. And this is where you're going to have to use that visibility tab, and you're going to have to create new versions of your NPC for every single time you want to use them under this story tree objective. This is something that might get fixed in the future, but it's one problem that I've run into that I wanted to give you a heads up about. So somebody like an NPC who you want to be recurring and you're trying to assign them a task or an objective over multiple instances, if you run into this error, that's the reason why. We'll see whether or not they fix that in the future, but here's the bottom line. You come up with an undiagnosed error, the first thing you should do is check the forums and see if anybody else is having that error. Neverwinter has a specific forum folder for the Foundry. Go there, use the search function, see if anybody else has come up with that same error, because if they have, that's where you'll find it. So those are the basics covering the tabs. Obviously there's a lot that I haven't covered here. Please comment on this video, let me know how I did. If you have any further questions, I'll be more than happy to let you know what I've done so far and see if I can come up with some answers for you. I'll be more than happy to do a follow-up to this video because, like I said, there's a lot I didn't cover and there's a lot more I could talk about. But that's my intro. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks. The website again is ectrauma.com.